Greetings, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. Today's session focuses on a topic that's becoming increasingly important in the technology sector, and that's why we have with us today an expert in tech intelligence and strategy. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Tim. Tim is an experienced market intelligence and research specialist with expertise across strategy, product development, competitive intelligence in the technology sector. He works as an independent technology consultant for us and has also been supporting bespoke research, market forecasting, customer insights, competitor analysis, and market strategy. He focuses on helping organizations strengthen how they use market intelligence to support better strategic and product decisions. And today, Tim will walk us through the key gaps in technology market intelligence and share practical ways organizations can build more compete and decision ready insights. Over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Soumya. Hi, everybody. So the first slide of the presentation is just a high-level view of market intelligence and the value of market intelligence. So I think you can look at this slide across all sectors, but my plan and my presentation today is to start to deep dive into the technology sector, technology industry in particular. But at a high level, I think the value of business information, market intelligence, as a starting point, it can help you identify new markets to play and compete in, but also define the markets that you operate in as well, which I think is increasingly important. If you've defined a market, you know who your customers are, you know who your competitors are, you know the dynamics within a particular market. So there's some real value there in market identification. And this is important, particularly in the technology sector. You can use market intelligence to help you optimize your products. Technology product development is really important, how quickly products are brought to market. And this is particularly useful. It's particularly useful to understand the market trends, how that can then feed back into product development as well. Another important element of market intelligence is understanding customer base. I'm going to talk a little bit about techniques that can be used to better understand your customers. Some of them quite straightforward, but some of them getting a bit more innovative, particularly technology-driven insights. And it's that customer understanding that, again, understanding the demands, the current demand, the future demands, that's really important. Another thing, and just working in this industry for a few years, I think just that ability to identify trends, what's coming next, is the pace of development, the pace of the trends in the tech sector. I think we're all familiar with AI and how quickly that's emerged in the last few years, or the last few months even. But this has been a trend over the years with technology, and intelligence providers definitely can help enterprises and the vendors that are competing in a particular market identify those trends and perhaps stress test, because vendors are aware of the trends themselves as well, but equally they can use market intelligence to stress test those trends. As I mentioned before, a market can be defined as supply side, demand side, but also competitively. So there's a whole series of competitor analysis techniques, some long established, some emerging. But competitive intelligence, information on competitors, is a really important part of market intelligence. And then I think the changing nature of industries means that there's a flux in terms of go-to-market. There's a flux in terms of company ownership, company structures, things like that. So I think, and this again, I've got a nice case study on the channel to market, go-to-market, but how a tech vendor partners brings its product to market is really important. So that could be its distribution approach, but equally that could be potential joint ventures with other firms that have complementary technology sets as well. And then finally, I think a lot of market intelligence can really help improve operations, improve efficiencies, business processes, and in technology in particular, that's a big part of the value of a technology investment. Is to remove inefficiencies, is to improve business processes. So that's a really important part again of why subscribing to market intelligence can be beneficial um, to a vendor. So moving on to the next slide, I just wanted to translate what I said there into some specific types of market analysis. So perhaps most important in the tech sector is this ability to pick up on the latest trends. And that could be in the short term, literally the next 2, 3 months, the medium term, perhaps 3 months to 18 months, and then the longer term. The longer term is a little bit harder to define because the long term can emerge very quickly. But for example, in the tech sector, you've got some very important technologies that will really become a major feature of the landscape later this decade and very much in the 2030s. Things like quantum computing, photonics. But a market intelligence provider needs to be able to interpret those trends and the impact of them and provide recommendations to the vendors as well. The second point, moving around this conceptual as a clock, would be the competitor analysis. So again, just understanding the competitors, what do the end users make of the particular vendors in a market? How is their technology rated? What's the quality of their technology? How are they performing? Which markets are they competing in? And a market intelligence provider needs to be able to give that information. And it could be, I'll come on to this shortly, it could be for strategic intelligence. How is our firm going to compete against this competitor? Or in the longer term, in terms of positioning, all that kind of stuff, the brand value, the perception. But it could be really on a tactical basis. So it could be in supplying the right information to the salespeople when they're in the field, so that they have information on competitors when they're having conversations with customers. An interesting element of market intelligence is to help with this, to help with marketing reach. So help your marketing, help with your positioning, make sure the right messages get across. But increasingly, I think this domain of business information really relates to things like understanding, getting peer insight, understanding what are end customers actually interested in, what products are they reviewing, how long are they staying on pages, what types of information are they consuming, and that can then all be used in aggregated form to understand target audience as well, and then better bring products to market. What I found interesting over the years of being a market analyst is that you can write syndicated research that's of a lot of interest on its own, but there's always another niche that a client or customer is interested in. And I think most tech vendors recognize that a lot of the off-the-shelf content that they need, whilst valuable, doesn't quite get to the point. And I think finding a partner that can help with to do customized research, bespoke research in the form of consulting engagements is very important. And that's definitely been good to work on some interesting consulting projects over the years for tech vendors. Things like pricing strategies, understanding channel to market, doing niche forecasts of particular intersections of vertical markets and technology markets as well. I think the fifth point on this slide, analyst advisory, is a really interesting one because we're all familiar with how much information is out there, and we're all limited in our time. Artificial intelligence has that potential to perhaps synthesize some of that information, but it's also very valuable to get that human touch, I think, when you're analyzing a market. And I think analyst advisory that ability to pick up the phone, have that conversation, get that perspective on the data you're looking at is definitely an important part of the market intelligence offering. Um, just a penultimate point really is around understanding pipeline. So obviously a big part of what a lot of market intelligence firms do is that getting a product to market, that funnel of opportunities, getting insight into the end customers, getting insight into the buyers, the buying potential. So I think that's another really important area that an MI firm can help with. And then the final point is just surveying. And I think what technology has done has made it very, very easy to gather information on end customers. What I've noticed over the years is there's a lot of panels of IT decision makers, IT managers, and they're willing and interested in giving their views on the latest technologies because they've actually reviewed them themselves. So there's this ability to do surveys of potential buyers, but also there's telephonic surveys as well of consumers and their interest in technology too. And you've got things like study groups and workshops where you can glean a lot of great information from your target audience. So that's just an overview of the types of market analysis. The next slide, I think, is a really important one. It's essentially to show that I think when you're looking for a market intelligence provider, what you don't want to see is a one size fits all approach. So a bit of analysis that just covers all bases and focuses on it isn't really focused on a particular user type, a particular persona. And what I've tried to do with this slide is just articulate all the different types of users within a technology vendor that might benefit from market intelligence. And if you look at the two arrows on either side of the slide, you can see that I think you could define these individual departments as perhaps revenue generating or client facing at the top, and then very much internal, inward looking, operational from the other side. But at the absolute very top, you've got executive leadership, the board, who are having to continually evolve their product offering, react to market changes, release new technologies that are cutting edge, in some cases bleeding edge, to get that first mover advantage in a market. And they need that insight into the trends, how the market is going to evolve. They need that insight into the appetite to purchase new technology. So they need to make essentially the right big bets around which technologies to invest in. And market intelligence can really help them do that, both in the form of written analysis, but also workshops, picking the brains of analysts. I think also within that client-facing realm, you've got those working on business development and strategy, which is similar, but a lot of those folks are feeding into the board. And then you've got the sales and marketing divisions who obviously need to position those products in the right way, get the right messages to market. And then the customer experience functions obviously need to ensure that the technologies are being consumed and used within the enterprises themselves, and they're getting benefit from those technologies. If you move a little bit further back, technologies need to be incubated and developed. Now, some of this work may actually be happening in laboratories within academic institutions, but equally, the big tech vendors will be incubating their own technologies. I have a little case study on that shortly, and I think this sort of information can be really beneficial. So they need to make sure that they're investing in the right areas, but also they're fully aware of the market developments and how quickly a technology may develop, so they can actually try to do their product development in time and get good time to market. I think you've also got IT departments, technology departments that will benefit within vendors themselves around technology deployments. Plus, they also want to just streamline their operations. And then I think, finally, a lot of the back office functions, legal compliance departments, they need to know about regulatory changes. I think you've got different regulations that are very different, like HIPAA, for example, in the US for healthcare has a particular set of requirements around technology delivery. Finance departments need to understand pricing trends because tech firms may need to change their pricing quite quickly, be quite nimble in the way that they do that. They need to understand discounts, channel to market, accreditations of vendors, things like that. And then procurement departments obviously buying the tech, buying buying in all sorts of for all sorts of supplies for the function of the firm, and then related to the product development I mentioned, there's an R&D function as well. So I think you've got 11 different departments. This is how I've defined it, but all in all, you could break out and have different niches of users within tech vendors. And as I said, just to summarize, I think each of these departments has slightly different need, and I think as a market intelligence provider needs to cater for those departments and give them messages and recommendations that are of value. So I've covered a little bit there just as an intro. I'm going to have three pauses, one now, one in another 10 minutes or so, and then one at the end. So if anybody has any questions at this stage, I'm happy to take them.
Hello, Tim.
Okay.
Hi.
Yeah, I have a question. Which of the types of market analysis tends to give the clearest early warning signals in fast-moving tech markets?
So I think the early trend identification is important there. But I think a good thing to look for from a provider is someone that I think this has been a criticism of market analysis firms that they tend to be on quite a slow schedule. So it could be once a year we cover a topic. But I think providers that are able to update their intelligence and information very quickly can definitely help there. But I think some of the points that I mentioned about when I talked about marketing reach, I think peer review and customer insights are really good there because they can get the latest information on what's happening in the market. And a lot of this stuff, whilst it's perhaps a bit unrealistic to be providing information in real time, I think a market intelligence provider should be able to provide information quite quickly. And by that, I mean literally within 2-3 weeks, a month, as to what is actually changing within a market. I hope that answers your question, Dan.
Could I start going back to I think the previous slide? You talked about pipeline analysis. Could you just say a little bit more about that? And this is the pipeline of products that competitors are bringing to market. Is that right?
Yes, so it can be that, but I think it can come in different forms. So it could be very much, perhaps the best way to define it would be supply side pipeline analysis. So what products are being brought to market by competitors? How are they bringing their products to market as well? But pipeline analysis can also be very much from the demand side. So it could be that insight into what end users, enterprises essentially, are spending on technologies and what technologies they have deployed as well. So I think that can then be used by sales and marketing folk to actually target different client types, client groups, different geographies, sectors, company sizes as well.
Great.
Okay, I will move on to the next slide.
Before we move ahead, there's one more question in the
Oh,
chat.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
So it goes like, shouldn't HR department also be identified? Training needs, recruitment needs.
Yes, that's a really good point. I mean, I think you could put that within operations, but absolutely, yeah. I mean, technology just generally is changing the way recruitment is happening. But there's a lot of artificial intelligence screening of a lot of firms are using specific HR software, aren't they? But I think HR would be a subset of operations, and as I think I mentioned, I tried to come up with some different departments, and there are 11 here, but you could actually segment lots of these down further. So that's a very good observation. Okay, so if
I think the questions we can move ahead.
yeah. So for those that do want to ask questions, as I said, we'll have another pause and then we'll have a long Q&A at the end. So I think the other important point, and this is related. This is perhaps thinking less around departments and more around what enterprises actually want to do and want to achieve. So, what vendors actually want to achieve. So these are technology vendors who are consuming market intelligence on their markets. But I think if you look at the two axes, again, on the y-axis, you've got back office functions, perhaps more internal functions, and then very much client-facing functions in the front office. But then you've got decisions on the x-axis, some which are very tactical, and some which are strategic. So this is the way I try to think about market intelligence. So you might want intelligence that's very tactical, could help you win business, could help you really win customers, help you identify customers, and help with your sales. Sorry, Pedro, I'll tell you what, I've still not seen that point. If we make a note to go back to the previous slide when we have the next pause, we'll do that for Pedro.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So you've got tactical market intelligence. I mean, at its easiest, how to win business. So things like, what's the right pricing? What's the right price points? How can I target and identify different groups of customers? How can I go to market in a way? How can I help my sales team that are actually there at the coalface trying to sell a technology? And that could be as simple as a battle card that gives them information on their competitors, that gives them information on the strengths, weaknesses, and of their competitors, for example. But on the other side of this, that can be really beneficial. So all that intelligence can really reap rewards very quickly. But on the other side, I think tech vendors, they're going to need that intelligence that is based around their strategy. So they might actually be looking at some partnerships at a high level, some joint ventures, or maybe they're looking to merge with another vendor that has complementary technologies that can a joint venture from a technology incubation point of view could bring out the best qualities of two vendors' technologies to create something even stronger. They might be looking at whether their business model is the correct one. How do they license? How do they license their technology? Is their product portfolio the optimal product portfolio? Should they change the way they bring their products to market? But then they're also going to need intelligence around what products they're going to release as well. And this comes back to that joint venture point. But they might just purely be incubating and creating their own technologies. So that knowledge around product innovation is really important. And then I wouldn't look at this slide as it's not a pure graph, if that makes sense. I'm just trying to make the point that some elements of decision making are very strategic, some are tactical. So things like competitive positioning, this could be a long-term strategy, but it equally could be a short-term need because the vendor might be losing a lot of business to another competitor that's coming to market very recently. But again, all these points here, things like market entry, market expansion, are really important. So I think you can look at this. You can look at this purely in terms of we don't compete in a certain market. So we're a UK-based firm and we don't compete. A UK-based vendor, and we don't compete in France or Germany. We're looking to expand. We want to understand the regulatory environment in those two countries. We want to understand how big the market is, what the competitors are, what the channel ecosystem is. We need that intelligence. Or it could be as simple as we think there's a new market, we think there's a new opportunity. We don't even play or compete in that at the moment. We need to move. We can move into that. Or we might be one of two or three vendors that are looking to get into a market, define a brand new market, which is also really interesting in the tech space. And that's how quickly things can move. So that's the key point, is that this intelligence can be used strategically, tactically, across a vendor, and it can really help a vendor change its performance, and redefine what a vendor does very, very quickly. So if we move on to the next slide, I've got a case study, a couple of case studies here of how market intelligence it is being used within a technology vendor. So this technology vendor, which I've spoken to very recently, actually uses intelligence to feed into its internal market model, and it helps to use that intelligence to make strategic decisions. So it has a 5 to 10 year business plan, and it's making investment choices off the back of the intelligence that it receives. So it needs to see how markets are evolving, and it wants to capture market developments. So it's using a combination of its own in-house sales data, its own projections, with the market intelligence vendor's view of the market. The market intelligence vendor has obviously done that research into the evolving trends, and that's where the value comes from, having the third-party intelligence vendor complementing the work that's done in-house. Now, different vendors have different approaches. Some might have their own in-house teams. Others will rely purely on the third parties that are tracking the market. But I think the nice thing here is that the intelligence can actually be customized, so it can actually be tailored to the needs of the vendor, and fit into the vendor's requirements. And then those reporting documents that are generated, they're both used internally to communicate with the board around business cases. Like this is our business case for entering into this market, or evolving our technology suite into this direction. But it can also be used to externally communicate with investors and customers. And ultimately, it can also be used financially, so to track capital expenditure and operating expenditure. So that's a good example of market intelligence that really helps with business cases, supporting decisions. It's the market direction that's so valuable. The next example on the next slide is a little bit more focused around product development. So this vendor, again, I've spoken to very recently, actually uses market intelligence to track the trends in the technologies that it's involved in. So this vendor is involved in supply chain management, manufacturing technology in areas such as server storage, data center, networking, physical infrastructure. So this vendor is really capturing that AI boom. We're all aware of AI in our own lives, our own work, but obviously there's huge amounts of investment going into cloud and data center technology to support these AI systems. And this vendor actually needs the market intelligence to help it with its business planning and its product development. It wants to make sure that it's not investing in technologies too early, or equally, it might need to speed up the way it's investing in its product development, so it doesn't get caught behind from a competitive point of view. So it needs to understand when a market is about to take off, and consequently, it needs information on the growth and the direction of a particular market. So it leans on a market intelligence provider to help it with that, help it with its decision making. If we move on to the next slide, I think this slide very much, I guess, comes back to the nub of the presentation, really, which is what are the gaps in tech sector market intelligence as I see it. And I think it's obviously, I think we've just from the initial slides that I've presented, there's so many different elements to the tech industry and what they're looking for. And there are a lot of market intelligence providers out there trying to fill those gaps. But I think when if I was engaging, if I was a buyer of market intelligence research coming from the other side, I would be demanding or looking for these sorts of capabilities on these slides, because I think these 8 points here are very much overlooked in terms of a lot of the market intelligence firms. So I think if we start in the top right, I think markets can move really quickly, and industries can change based on new entrants to markets. So I would be looking at adjacent markets, in particular to the ones I'm competing in, and just monitoring some of the competitors in those markets. If I use a slightly different example, but it's technology related, would be how quickly and how impressive Chinese vendors have been in moving into the electric vehicle market in recent months. And that's caught a lot of the established automotive manufacturers off guard. I think a lot of market intelligence needs to get into, it needs that depth into regional nuances and regional trends. So you should be looking for information that isn't continental market sizes information. I think you really should be looking for information on specific markets, and I think good intelligence providers can provide that granularity in terms of data. Say, let's have a look at the Austrian and Swiss market rather than just the EU, for example. I think the other important thing with technology is it's a real value of technologies in it is understanding business processes. And I think technology trends by vertical market are definitely very important. A lot of tech vendors, understandably for reasons of scale, go to market horizontally. But I think technology, when it can solve those business problems, improve efficiencies, it can be really, really beneficial. I think the other thing with the tech sector is channel to market, and I think just understanding the channel to market ecosystem is very important. And I've got a good example of that shortly, where I'll go into that point more. I think sustainability and ethical considerations are definitely really important. Obviously, the change in US administration, perhaps not front and center there, but I think, or with certain elements of certain geographies, clearly, but I still think, the concerns around sustainability and ethics are definitely important. If you think about things like data centers and how much heat they generate, obviously the rollout of data centers, the cooling that's required, and the need for vendors to actually address some of those points. I think an analysis of that landscape, particularly by geography and different views and opinions, is definitely going to be key. As I touched on before, regulation can change quite quickly. If I use an example from consumer technology, I don't know how many UK folk are on the call here, or Australian, for example. But if you look at those two geographies, Australia's just had its ban on social media for under 16s, and that's being considered in the UK. So if were that to happen, that could have quite a big impact on the technology vendors that cater for those consumer markets as well. And then I think this, as Diana asked, or as I touched on earlier from Diana's question, this understanding customer sentiment, behavioural shifts, that ability to capture the latest trends, latest information, is really important. And that can be translated into the top point around perhaps the most important of all, It's just what's emerging, what's changing, what are the trends. And a really important term in the tech sector is disruption. What technologies could actually disrupt a sector? And we can, as I said before, with artificial intelligence, that could be the biggest disruptor that we see, all of us in our working lives. So that ability to actually analyze and interpret what's happening, both quantitatively, as in the market size and direction, but also qualitatively, is really important. So if we move on to the next slide, just how does that translate into different types of market analysis then? And this is perhaps reiterating the point that I've made. So you might need to expand the competitive analysis you do. As I said, look at adjacent markets, do more in-depth analysis of your competitors. There might be a need for more localized intelligence. So, and by localized, I think you can think of that as geography, vertical, and size band. Do I have a bit more insight into how the demand for a technology might vary by size of organization? How might the regulatory environment change by sector, and which geographies might display a greater demand for the technologies that I'm trying to position? Related to that is mapping out the ecosystem, and that will be the side after we have our next little break. I will talk a little bit about channel to market. I think this ability to please shareholders, but just do a good thing for planet Earth around incorporating sustainability frameworks. It's definitely a big trend in the tech sector, and you should be looking for information on that. Tracking of regulation, I've already covered. Talked a little bit about healthcare. There are other regulatory things like Gramm-Leach-Bliley is one as well. I think that might be financial services or consumer. I apologise, I can't remember. But this regulatory landscape is definitely really, really important. And then I think mix of quantitative and qualitative research is definitely important. You need that blend. You need that interpretation of the data, and you need that touch point with analysts as well, I think, to really help you, rather than that can be a really efficient use of your time. And then just all the benefits of data, big data trends in terms of predictive analytics, and then of course the use of artificial intelligence to synthesize the information. That's definitely becoming more and more prevalent in the intelligence space. Just a lot of us are using tools such as Notebook LLM, ChatGPT, obviously to summarize and synthesize information. But I think there's some real benefits in finding a partner that has a good tools on its side to sort of synthesize information, provide that information in nice nuggets. So if we move on to the next slide, I'm going to do another case study as well of how intelligence is used. But this is, we can go back one actually, Falguni. I think it's this is another good time to just have a very quick pause if anyone had any questions on those previous slides, or we could go back to Pedro's question on slide 4. Happy to do that.
Hi, Tim. I have a
Hi.
question from the previous slide. Actually, have you seen cases where better intelligence actually slow decision making, and how should leaders handle that trade-off?
Sorry, better intelligence is what decision making? Improved or?
Have you seen any cases like where better intelligence actually slowed decision making?
Slowed it?
Yeah.
I can't think. I mean, I suppose one thing that does happen at a board level is there's often competing views around, and don't underestimate this. There's obviously competing views around. I talked a bit about the big bets that technology vendors need to be making, and there's often different directions that senior leadership need to take their vendors in. And I think if you think about that, sometimes intelligence can be used politically and could lead to more entrenchment of views. So I don't have a specific example, but I do know that certainly working as a technology consultant, sometimes you might be used for political purposes. Can you ultimately give a view that the senior person in a firm says, can you ultimately give me some information that supports my viewpoint? And that person might be using their information to have a debate internally around the direction that they want to take their vendor in.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you.
If we could go back to the slide, just no, the other one, the next one. Yes. So, yeah, I think Tim, thank you so much, first of all, for your very comprehensive presentation. I think you answered already partially my question with this slide, because when you mentioned the departments and you mentioned procurement and operations, I was thinking about supply chain management and how important it is to also for those people involved in supply chain management to how important it is for them market surveillance. But I think you already included here on the supply chain strategy. But perhaps you could detail a little bit more on your experience. How can we use market intelligence to make our influence into the supply chain stronger and more effective?
Yes. So I'll give an answer. I think Oliver might have one or two things to say here. I mean, I suppose one thing might be tariffs and trade and things like that, staying abreast of what's happening there. Obviously, we're in a global political environment where they can change very quickly. I think we've got a nice case study as well, which was the next thing I was going to come on to. And this is a bit more channel to market, but it's in the way trying to understand the way that technology vendors bring their products to market. So whether they maybe have build up inventory of their stock and then supply it that way, or whether they actually configure to order or assemble to order, and trying to identify some of the complexities in their supply chain, how that might vary by vendor. I think a lot of this information, it would be interesting to get your feedback, perhaps as a buyer or someone who works in the industry, whether that sort of information is available off the shelf. So I think a lot of the time, some of the supply chain analysis, I think a lot of that information is available, but you might need to actually ask for customized research to get that information. So sometimes it's quite niche. It's related to a technology, a particular technology set of products. So does that partially answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim.
No problem. Okay. So if I go on to this next case study. So this one is about that's a good question from Emma. I think we'll cover that one at the end, Soumya. So this is the channel to market point that I was making. So I think you've got different fulfillment models. So by fulfillment models, I mean, are you building to stock it? So you could actually build up your inventory. Let's say this is, I don't know, laptops, for example, or it's a bit of computer hardware. Or are you taking an order and assembling, and this is perhaps for a higher end laptop, or are you configuring this technology to order? And I think it's quite interesting to actually see how different vendors approach their fulfillment models and how that might vary by product type, by geography, by vendor. And this is the sort of work that market intelligence providers can do, because they can look across the key players in the market. They can speak to people that are working in the channel to market environment and actually understand how some of these metrics might vary by firm, because ultimately the speed, the quality, the efficiency of the channel to market ecosystem can have a massive impact on the end users' buyer experience. I think the point here is that a good market intelligence provider should be able to track a lot of these metrics ultimately to review vendor performance and competitive positioning. So metrics could be things like average selling prices as well, could be shipments, could be spend per employee. So you've got that ability to outline the differences in supply chain structure, configuration, complexity, and demand intensity. So that was the final of my 3 case studies, and then the penultimate slide is the next one, which is just some thoughts around what, as tech vendors, you should be looking for from a market intelligence provider. And these are my views. So as I said before, and this is essentially a summary, really. So it's the identification of emerging trends is key. I think it's always good if the analyst house is quite visible, has good market presence. And then I also think it's helpful if the analyst house is able to define market trends and shape the narrative. Are they able to define new markets? Are they able to get that information out on new markets and their shape and direction in a timely fashion? And then I think you want data sets that are comprehensive, so that cover all the bases that identify all the spend that's happening, and perhaps that can draw comparisons with other sectors and see where the intersections are between markets, rather than discrete blocks of spend that don't interrelate. I think that's really important. And then the final points here are, I think it's good when you can, I mean, to a degree, we're doing this currently, where you can create some forums for people to share and collaborate their views. Plus finally, just track what's going on in terms of customer demand, what's going on in terms of the pulse of the customer. So what do customers want? What are the trends? What are the things that are happening on the coalface? So that's what I would be looking for from a market intelligence provider. And then just the final slide really is just to talk about some of the research quality. So breadth and depth, I think, are really key. Obviously, it might be unrealistic for a market intelligence provider to be super broad and super deep, but I think you need to find the balance between the two. You don't want someone that's so broad but just too shallow. But equally, if a partner is very narrow and very deep, that might be very useful, but that might equally be frustrating because it's just not reflective of your needs. You need more information than what you're getting from them. We've talked a lot about the timeliness of the views and just capturing that information as and when it's happening, that being really important. You need something that's objective and not subjective. You need that independent third party to give a view. I think you need good writing, good visuals, and I think you need a mix of research now. I mean, I've been speaking to technology vendors who they want podcasts. They want to listen to something on their way to work rather than read something. You know, we're all faced with information saturation. There's so much information coming out every day. I mean, in the hour that we've been speaking, there'll be a lot more news will have happened, right? So we need that research to be easily ingested for it to provide value. And then the final points, we need it to be accurate. We need it to be from a trustworthy source with a strong methodology, where the research has been really thought through and has some rigor. And then you also need some consistency. You know what you're going to get when you pick up a bit of research from a market intelligence provider. So they're my thoughts around what I would be looking for if I was a buyer. And that I believe is the final slide. We've got 7 or 8 minutes, haven't we? So we did have Q&A at the end as well.
Just before we wrap up, there's just one quick thought to connect today's decision. So Tim highlighted what strong decision-ready market intelligence should look like. It should have depth, timeliness, objective, broad coverage, clarity, and credibility. And that's exactly the approach we at the Business Research Company follow in the research and the intelligence work that we do. With tech focus strategy and the product teams. And if any of the challenges discussed today resonate with you at all, or if you're seeing your organization could benefit from anything that you heard today, we would be more than happy to continue the conversation thereafter. Thank you. Over to you, Tim.
Yes, so I did see, I think Emma had a question, but I saw it flash up at the bottom. I didn't quite catch it. Perhaps we can repeat that question.
How should companies prioritize intelligence gaps when time and resources are limited?
That's a very good question. I think it's all around internal prioritization ultimately. One thing I would do would be perhaps that regular touch points. I think it's perhaps sharing of their business priorities and their objectives with their market intelligence provider, and then just having that regularity of touch point. Are you missing anything? What has changed in the last 3 months? So if you're able to track those developments, I think that is the key one. Tracking market developments. If you're able to stay abreast of that, then that's really beneficial, especially if you're time crunched. You might be also you might want to. I would really define your needs with the market intelligence provider, and then you might want a regular alert, a customized bit of information that comes into you every month or every week at a cadence that you're happy with. That would be the way I would approach it. And a good market intelligence firm should be able to do that for you.
Emma, I hope that answers your question. And any other questions, anyone?
Yeah, Tim, I have a question. When multiple market intelligence providers claim similar data sets, what actually differentiates credibility?
That's a very good question. So I would be looking for methodology. So I would absolutely be scrutinizing how they've gathered that information. So is it a mix of secondary research, primary research, analyst insights? How many end user buyers, for example, have they spoken to? I would be looking at their taxonomy as well. So in the tech market, I think something I would always be looking out for is whether you think the technology taxonomy is outdated or not, because that's a sign that they might have built their model 5-10 years ago and they're still repositioning the same categories. And you want a firm, or you want a provider that is very much on the money with the latest market definitions. So I would say those two things, categories and methodology, would be the things to look out for.
Yeah, thank you, Tim.
Okay.
I guess these are the questions, Tim. I don't think we have any more questions. All
okay,
right.
well,
Conclude for today. Thank you, Tim. Thank you so much for your insights. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. We look forward to having you for our next webinar. We have 2 series of webinars going on at the moment. One is for the technology sector with Tim, and one for competitive intelligence for various roles, ideas, and sorts of companies by Oliver Gurdam, our CEO. And there's another one that is ongoing at the moment with the Director of Life Sciences Consulting on multiple life science related topics that are in the trend. Thank you so much. Good day.